Here's Oliver. Say hello.
Hey, chat.
All right, so yeah, we can definitely do that. I didn't have anything in mind, but we can definitely say if chat hits like maybe $1,000, we'll throw the hat on for the rest of the interview, or for a little bit afterwards, maybe the rest of the stream post interview, so we can actually cut the interview into something that's reasonable.
Love it.
Awesome. All right, so chat, this is Oliver Larkin, who's running to replace Moskowitz in Florida 23rd. So I'll give you a little bit of time. You can just like maybe introduce yourself, give you like little elevator pitch maybe, and then we'll get into some questions from both me and from chat later.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? Oliver Larkin here in sunny South Florida. I'm a former Bernie Sanders campaign staffer, union organizer, longtime progressive activist running for Congress in Florida's 23rd Congressional District. So just to locate us on a map, we're in between Miami and West Palm Beach on the southeast Atlantic side of Florida. Running on a platform of Medicare for all, $25 minimum wage, a Green New Deal, ending U.S. support for genocide and apartheid, ending this illegal war with Iran, and bringing those taxpayer dollars home to invest in those affordability measures to lower the cost of living and restore the American dream for everyone. So first-time candidate, super excited about the momentum we're building to replace Jared Moskowitz, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to hear from you and great to hear from your team. So I guess we can get started pretty quickly. So you're born 4th of July, Army family, grew up in Fort Lauderdale, ended up quitting your $7.25 an hour like cook line job to drive to New Hampshire, volunteer for Bernie. What is that moment like? Like what switch flips that just makes you be like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I have to be involved in whatever comes next.
Yeah, I think it really started when I was working on that grill for $7.25 an hour, seeing my paycheck at the end of each week, working 40, 50, 60 hours, taking as many shifts as I could, covering my friends' shifts, and still only getting, $250, $300 in a paycheck at the end of the week. That's maybe going to fill up gas and cover a few grocery runs, but that's not nearly enough. And at the same time, I was paying such close attention after Florida had reelected Rick Scott, our then governor, who was banning terms like climate change and really was on the forefront of this Tea Party movement that turned into the MAGA movement. I just knew that I needed to take greater responsibility for my own political future and that of my friends and family and the community that I love. And that's when I really started paying attention to Bernie Sanders. And it very quickly reached a point where I was working in Tennessee, not exactly an early primary priority state for the campaign. So I had signed up to volunteer. I was waiting day after day, week after week for them to reach out. I was consuming every piece of information that I could. And really, I reached a point where I was seeing Bernie down 50, 60 points in the polls to Hillary Clinton at that time. And I knew that if I was as passionate as I was, and I was consuming the level of information and trying to be as informed as I could, and really looking and seeking out for every piece of news on the Sanders campaign, I knew that I just had a responsibility if this campaign was going to go anywhere to go to New Hampshire and actually to tell people about it, about why I felt so strongly. And it was because I was working for the $7.25 an hour minimum wage when he was talking about a $15 an hour minimum wage nationwide. It's because I was taking on student loan debt at a time that he was talking about college for all, and seeing my family struggle with healthcare crises when Bernie's talking about Medicare for all and the corruption in the United States of big pharma and private health insurance that makes us the highest income nation on earth not to guarantee healthcare as a right when we pay twice as much per capita as countries including Canada, right? So I think it was that direct connection. It was the direct connection to my daily life and actually improving my material conditions of more money in my pocket, not having the weight of student loan debt hanging over my head. That really motivated me to go to New Hampshire, and it's motivated me for the decade since.
Amazing. So from New Hampshire, you go like to DC. You're in DC during COVID, during the George Floyd protests, January 6th. Like, how does like joining the DSA in that window and like becoming involved with the DSA at that time, how does that like change how you approach or how you see American politics? Like, was there a shift there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think considering myself as a democratic socialist from 2015, from that first Sanders run that I became a part of, and formally joining the organization in 2020, what we saw in between then was Bernie Sanders be completely stifled by the DNC in the 2016 primary. We saw some really amazing progressive wins. We saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez be elected in 2018, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and working with the Bernie organization, Our Revolution, that grew out of the 2016 campaign. I was actually helping to spread the word and fundraise and support with our progressive progressive grassroots groups, those candidates that we saw elected. But then the 2020 election happens, and at a moment where we're suffering a once in a century global pandemic, something that should have really displayed the shared struggle and solidarity and concern that we need to have for our neighbors, for our neighbors' health care, because the health of our community is our own health. And instead, we saw a Democratic Party that once again closed ranks around the establishment candidate, Joe Biden, even after he'd been washed in New Hampshire and Iowa. The party just closed ranks again to stop this Sanders momentum. And when we saw the racial justice uprising, not only for George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others, it just became clear to me that we were going to have to really build an outside parallel power structure to the Democratic Party if we were going to have any kind of concerted effort to change the direction of politics in this country, because we saw the backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement, the defund the police movement, and Democrats really hedged and returned and retreated to the status quo. And that's what brought us a second term of Donald Trump. And that's what we're trying to confront and change in this primary.
For sure. That's interesting. So like as a Democratic Socialist, running in a Democratic primary in like a Dem plus 5, Dem plus 6 like district in Florida, like what is the framing that makes you different from establishment Democrats when you come in as a Democratic Socialist? Like what values are different? What are you trying to push the party like left on?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it is that affirmative identification as a democratic socialist in a place like South Florida, where socialism has been such a dirty word for such a long time. We're touching that third rail of politics. We're challenging the norms. And I think that's really what's gotten people so excited, because they see it as a marker of courage, of authenticity, of integrity and character, that I'm not going to be afraid of saying what I actually believe. And I think it's that connection to running a grassroots campaign as well, not taking the corporate PAC money, that people really connect it to, and know that in an era where so many politicians are just distrusted because you don't know what they're saying that they actually believe and what their corporate donors are telling them to believe. I think it's our marker of authenticity, and really helps us stand out. And people in South Florida know, I mean, the ICE terrorist regime that is deporting our neighbors and detaining people, they're absconding with kids and sending them to detention centers. It is completely. I was in a working class community in Margate yesterday. It's got about 60,000 people. It's about even split, one third, one third, one third, black, white, Hispanic, and Latino.
Yeah.
Lot of immigrants from the Caribbean, a lot of people who are concerned, and their families are directly affected by ICE. And I was speaking to one middle-aged mom who, through tears, said, "I don't know how in this country we can be okay with having concentration camps like Dilley Immigrant Detention Center in Texas, detaining kids, and at the same time bombing children in Gaza. I don't know how my political leaders can expect me to divorce my own humanity from those of the children I see in Gaza that are going without their parents, their homes. They're being, murdered by U.S. taxpayer dollars." And so I think the connection to the cost of living crisis here, where Florida Atlantic University, which is the largest public university in our district in Boca Raton, they polled all Floridians last year in the fall and found that more than half are considering leaving our state. So at the same time that we see corporate funded Democrats like Jared Moskowitz voting to say, APAC literally was tweeting, "Thank you, Jared
Yeah.
Moskowitz," the other day. I mean, that's the level that we're at with this primary and the level of contrast. So when we're seeing that at the same time that our communities are being divested from, we know that we need a change in the Democratic Party, and that not all Democrats are built the same. Our campaign is truly built different.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. So, on immigration and on ICE, like the deportation infrastructure was built up under Obama, and it was also like increased under Biden. So it's not just a Republican problem. It's not just a Trump problem. That's something that has been kind of uniparty over the last little while. So like, how do you help shift the Democratic stance from where it currently sits to the like abolish and prosecute that I know that you've advocated for?
Yeah, this goes to the very first day that I launched my campaign. It was the day that Donald Trump went with Ron DeSantis to tour Alligator Alcatraz down in the Everglades. And so I literally woke up, I sent out my press release and my launch email and posted on social media, "I'm running for Congress." And then I went down to the Everglades and I spoke to Status Quo News outside of the Everglades Detention Center. And I talked about the betrayal that I felt, that My wife, who's the proud daughter of Nicaraguan immigrants, felt in our household the betrayal of Kamala Harris campaigning on Donald Trump wasn't building the border wall fast
Yeah.
enough. It's this incompetency argument. It's the same thing that you hear Jared Moskowitz, in fact, say when Kristi Noem was coming before the House committee for a hearing. Jared Moskowitz is saying, "You promised all this miles of border wall built. You haven't built any of it." Like, what kind of an argument is that when Democrats are conceding to the Republican Party at the same time that we have kids in cages? And the thing that we heard in the first Trump administration that we were never going to allow again, but then we have, after Trump wins the popular vote in 2024, Democrats that are all too willing to work with him. Jared Moskowitz is one Democrat who voted for the Larkin-Riley Act, but there were 46 Democrats who
Yeah.
voted for this very first law that Donald Trump signed after he promised mass detentions and deportations on the 2024 campaign trail. The very first law that Republicans passed with the help of all too many Democrats was giving ICE this power to detain people if they were just simply charged with a
Accused,
crime,
yeah.
not convicted. If they were accused, and we know how flimsy a lot of these accusations can be, especially when it's targeting minority and underprivileged
For sure.
communities. So it was really running as a Democrat against a pro-ICE Democrat, the first Democrat who joined Doge in all of Congress.
Yeah.
Jared Moskowitz joined Elon Musk's Doge caucus, someone who is still to this day campaigning proudly as a twice appointed Ron DeSantis Democrat, as if that is a marker of pride. This is really the difference in this primary race. And I think, running in South Florida, as soon as we open up this conversation with people, people are angry right now. They want to see Democrats stand up to the Donald Trump administration. And instead, what they're seeing is that our Democratic member of Congress is working with the administration. So people are ready for a change.
For sure. For sure. So you've been like pretty clear on the record about what Israel has done in Gaza is a genocide, which is obviously a place that Moskowitz is never going to go, given his founding and his funding. He's actively pushed against that. AIPAC is his top lifetime donor. He's voted to censure Rashida Tlaib. He co-sponsored the amendment to block the State Department even using the Gaza Health Ministry numbers. He voted to fund an Israeli aid package that cut funding to the IRS in order to get the money for Israel to do that. So like, walk me through like what you would have done differently in those situations, and like what you think the Democrats have been avoiding doing that you would push for them to do in this situation.
Yeah, he was one of the tax cheat 12 that voted to cut billions in IRS funding to send more weapons to Israel. So I think it's one thing is very clear, and it's been clear in our conversations on the doors and as well as in our polling. By a 2-to-1 margin in our district, voters do not want the United States to militarily fund Israel. Point blank.
Right.
We see it as a genocide. We see the actions in the West Bank as expanding an out of control apartheid regime. And these are likely Democratic voters in one of the top 10 most Jewish represented districts in the country. So this is uniform. The Democratic Party voter base is united on this issue. We see what Israel is doing as a genocide. And so we can't be afraid of taking these lonely votes. When I just saw Chuck Schumer at an AIPAC conference saying that because Palestinians do not believe in the Torah, that's why there is no peace in the Middle East. I mean,
Yeah.
this is so out of control. And the Democratic Party leadership, this is really the message of our campaign. This leadership is dragging Democrats down in this midterm election by continuing to embrace an issue that lost the 2024 election for us. So even as unpopular as Donald Trump is, we see Democrats with record low approval ratings. So what would I do differently? I would vote to not make any distinction between offensive and defensive weaponry. When we're talking about things like the Iron Dome, this is the predicate that Israel is able to use to continue to insulate themselves and launch these out of control attacks. It's not only on Gaza or the West Bank, it's on Yemen, it's on Syria. It's them pulling the United States into this illegal war with Iran that Jared Moskowitz gave Donald Trump a blank check for by calling Ro Khan and Thomas Massey's War Powers Resolution the so-called Ayatollah Protection Act.
Right.
This is Jared Moskowitz, by the way, who bought Lockheed Martin stock 4 times, which hit an all-time high on the market the Monday after these illegal strikes. So what would I do differently? It is standing up, standing with Rashida Tlaib, standing with the few courageous members that can really, when we look at the margins in the House of Representatives, a few members can make a difference in standing up to the party establishment and really extracting some real concessions. And I think those concessions need to be following U.S. law and following international law. Our set of laws, the Leahy laws that prevent military
Yeah.
funding to foreign armies that are accused of gross human rights violations. We're breaking the law right now, and that doesn't matter to Jared Moskowitz, but it does matter to me, and I will follow the letter of the law and enforce really U.S. law over this insane military support that we're sending to Israel.
Yeah, you're unfortunately not alone there, and our government is continuing to find loopholes to send the precursors to weapons to the United States to then be shipped to Israel, despite telling people publicly that we are, not doing that. So I want to go to that for a little bit, just quickly. So I'm Canadian, so I have to ask you. The last couple of years, between the tariffs, the 51st state stuff, the Governor Trudeau comments, the U.S. has been treating Canada more as like an adversary than an ally. So it's been causing a lot of Canadians to look at the United States not as like our closest ally, our closest friend, but as somebody who we're not really sure what that relationship is like. How does that land for somebody from South Florida? Like, is that something you hear about at all? Is the relationship between the United States and their allies, the United States and Canada, or is this something that is just more focused up here?
It is a concern in South Florida. And as you may know, there are a lot of snowbirds from Canada who come down to winter in South Florida. And so it's very, very common to see license plates from Quebec, from Ontario, here in South Florida, especially in the winter months. And with the level of really just aggression that we've heard from the Trump administration, that scared a lot of these snowbirds and tourists. I don't use that term pejoratively. We love having
For sure, yeah.
visitors from Canada come down here. And so it's really scared a lot of them off and made them feel unwelcome. And the United States is really retrenched into this nationalist, kind of bunker mentality that we're looking out from behind our guns and from behind our walls at the rest of the world, including at Canada. And there's such weakness in the Democratic Party certainly, but as well as the Republican Party. I recall in 2016 when Scott Walker was asked, "Would you build a wall on the northern border with Canada?" He said yes, because they're so prisoner to their base. There's a saying that Republicans fear their base, Democrats despise their base in the United States, and with what the Republican Party is doing, it is this caveman nationalist kind of fervor that they've whipped people up into. Donald Trump is looking for Lebensraum in Greenland and talking about Canada as the 51st state. There are renewed threats of invading Cuba once again, even as he is simultaneously declaring victory in Iran and also saying, Congress, send us $200 billion, allies, why aren't you helping? So it's a very mixed message there. And it's because this administration, its only predicate is this expansionist kind of neo-colonial architecture where we're absconding with Nicolas Maduro and violating Venezuelan sovereignty. We're making those same threats to Cuba and elsewhere. So I really fear very much what that is doing for the U.S.-Canada relationship. And we've seen, again, in the first Trump administration, undocumented immigrants and refugees actually fleeing to Canada for a less punitive environment than what they were receiving in the United States. So this is a real race to the bottom for the United States, and it's affecting our own people as well. This kind of rooting out of immigrant communities and people from outside the U.S., it inevitably blows back on the people who do live here as well. And so our shared solidarity across borders and taking an internationalist perspective to supporting sovereignty and supporting international cooperation is something that is really important to me, because I believe it's something that we need to get North America back on the right track and working cooperatively on things like immigration, on the economy, on addressing wealth and income inequality and climate change.
For sure. Yeah, we finally, I'm not sure how much you know about Canadian politics, but our essentially Democratic Socialist Party just elected a new leader who has come out completely in the opposite direction. Our party was doing what the Democrats do. The NDP was running kind of towards the center and was courting liberal voters and conservative voters rather than trying to appeal to who wins most elections in Canada as well as in the US, which is just people that didn't vote. So we have somebody who's doing something similar here. So Canada has single payer healthcare. We got pretty strong labor protections, functioning public broadcasters. And at least like we have with Avi Lewis now taking over the NDP, somebody who's putting forward ideas like non-market housing and things like that as ways to solve housing problems. You're running on like Medicare for all, $25 minimum wage. Is Canada a useful reference point for you as somewhere where some of these policies do work for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And to give a prime example, last fall I went to the Medicare for All National Strategy Conference in Rockledge, Florida, at the Space Coast Health Foundation. And there were healthcare organizations from all across the country, including many right here in our state of Florida. It was sponsored by Medicare for All Florida. And we talked about the different avenues to achieving single payer healthcare in the United States. And one example was the Canadian model of starting at the province, at the provincial level, and then expanding it out to a national system. And so that's something that here in Florida, where we have Republicans that have gerrymandered supermajorities in both the state House and state Senate, as well as on the congressional level, we should be advocating for Democratic controlled states to aggressively pursue single payer health insurance programs within those states, to build a national framework that we can then make the viability for establishing a federal national health insurance program. And I believe that should be part of a broader shift towards a national healthcare system where we're also bringing the production of pharmaceuticals, our medical and nursing providers, as well as our hospitals, under government control so that we're not having this inordinate profit model that is extracting so much wealth out of the working class and shoveling it up towards the private health insurance and hospital corporation CEOs. That's also, as a matter of fact, how we got our United States Senator Rick Scott. He made his personal wealth with $1.7 billion in Medicare fraud back in the 90s, the then
Yeah.
record largest Medicare fraud. That's what goes for a Republican public servant these days. So I think Canada is a useful model for healthcare as well as for labor protections. I think as well for respecting Indigenous sovereignty. I know that Canada has not been perfect in that respect, but as we're currently examining the relationship between the Miccosukee tribe of Indians, on whose land Alligator Alcatraz, the Everglades Detention Center, is being built and expanded as it's threatening the natural habitat and keystone species like Florida panthers, I think respecting Indigenous sovereignty is an experience that both the United States and Canada can learn from one another. And I think that's also a model to have more of this restorative and regenerative ecological practices by taking on factory farms as well as the fossil fuel extraction that is so deeply affecting both of our economies, and trying to transition away from that fossil fuel economy towards green renewables so that we can preserve the health of both of our countries.
That's amazing. Cool. So your economic program, the $25 minimum wage, Medicare for all, restoring higher marginal tax rates, is like strong social democracy for somebody who is coming from somewhere that is already in that kind of sphere. Like, what's this ceiling on your politics? Like, I know you've been big in organizing around union protections and labor rights. Like, are you somebody who advocates for worker ownership, co-ops? When you think about long term, are you someone who moves in that direction or somebody who is more like a New Deal style framing?
I think we do need a model of worker co-ops and worker ownership. I think that could come in the form of looking at U.S. bankruptcy laws and giving workers the right to purchase the business from founders or
Kind of like what
CEOs.
Corbyn was talking about with labor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think more worker co-ops, and I think similarly with housing model to create more social housing and promote that affordability model. And housing in the United States has been used as one of the few remaining means of generating any kind of wealth, and so that's really thrown the housing market upside down, where we have a shortage of supply, and it's used to people sit on it, and it really is the only predicate for building any kind of wealth for yourself when pensions have been ripped away, when Social Security does not rise with the cost of living. People look at housing as a means of investment rather
Yeah.
than how we're going to house people equitably in our society. So I think in terms of labor law, that's one thing I've been really outspoken at as a union organizer. We need to not only pass the PRO Act, which is going to expand union membership, but there are laws that have been on the books in the United States for decades, including Taft-Hartley, that have banned public sector workers' right to strike. Here in Florida, teachers make the lowest average salary in the entire United States. I believe it's below $50,000 a
Yeah.
year. It is just not nearly enough to get by, and their right to strike is banned by both federal and Florida law.
Yeah.
And when we've seen some of the most popular labor actions happening in the United States in recent years, it's oftentimes been these wildcat teacher strikes in places like West Virginia, Kentucky, Colorado, where teachers are standing up for their rights, even though it's not based on the law. The law does not always reflect what is truly right and just. And in the United States, we don't have labor law, we have anti-labor law. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I think having a much more aggressive worker focused initiative in reforming U.S. labor law, the bankruptcy courts, so that we can promote more social ownership, more worker co-ops, is going to really chip away at this wealth and income inequality that we're experiencing. And I'm proud to be running again as a democratic socialist. I believe that capitalism itself is antithetical to building a happy, healthy society and a sustainable planet. We are experiencing a mass extinction event because of the fossil fuel economy and the capitalist model of colonialization and extraction. And that is very quickly, our time is running out on that. And so we need to reorient ourselves. And so that's why I believe in really democratic control and ownership of entire sectors of the economy: healthcare, housing, education, transportation. The market on itself is not going to move things fast enough at the rate that we need to address these multiple crises at the same time.
Right. Yeah. You can't address crises when you're worried about the profit motive all the time.
Yeah.
For sure. So you touched on housing a little bit, and I think housing has been getting worse for most of our lifetimes. I know the 2008 crash was really bad in the United States. We actually never had a crash in Canada. Like, our housing market has continued to get worse at that same rate, basically since 2008. So my question is, like, what concrete steps can you take at the federal level to help alleviate the cost of living crisis in terms of like housing and housing pricing? Are there any systems that you have looked at that you think would work within Florida 23rd and like more broadly across the state and the country?
Yeah. So there's been laws on the books since the 1990s, since Bill Clinton's administration. There's an amendment called the Faircloth Amendment that was passed. And what it did is cap social housing units at the inventory that existed in October of 1999. The United States has grown by tens of millions of people since then, but we have not had a similar increase in the number of social housing units. What's happened instead is, because municipalities and local governments are not allowed to own more social housing units than existed 25 years ago, instead we have funding for new housing routed through nonprofits and much more inefficient models that slow down the construction of new housing and make that housing much more expensive. And so we're not able to achieve the scale that we need to address the true supply and shortage of housing in the United States. So what I would do is repeal that Faircloth Amendment. There's also legislation that's been introduced by Ilhan Omar called the Homes for All Act. What this would do is build 12 million new affordable homes in the United States. That really addresses the shortage that we're experiencing. But I also believe that we need to do things like banning private equity and Wall Street and corporate landlords from owning so much housing stock, which is the case here in Florida, where we have tens of thousands of housing units that are owned by companies like Invitation Homes. And those are the same corporations that are investing in Jared Moskowitz and corporate Democrats like him. There's a home construction company called Lennar Homes that their top three beneficiaries of their campaign donations in 2024 were Jared Moskowitz's PAC, and the National Republican Congressional Committee. If that doesn't tell you anything
Right.
about the kind of corporate Democrat that I'm running against, I think that's pretty illustrative. But to take it back to the point of how to build more housing, I think it is repealing that Faircloth Amendment. It's Ilhan Omar's Homes for All Act, and it's banning private equity and corporate landlords from owning so much housing stock.
Yeah, for sure. So going to Moscow, it's like his defenders would probably say like the DeSantis appointment was an apolitical like crisis management. Doge was engagement, not endorsement. And like I know there were rumors that like he was going to be tagged to run FEMA for Trump. Like rumor, not choice. Like, what's your response to somebody trying to make that case to you in good faith that like that isn't indicative of his like Republican leanings?
Yeah, I mean, him joining Doge, what did that get us? They immediately went to void collective bargaining agreements of hundreds of thousands of federal workers. The Department of Education has been destroyed to the degree that it's going to be really, really hard to put those pieces back together. I mean, people's entire livelihoods have been upended. There's no putting the pieces back together for someone who got laid off on no notice and has everything that they worked their entire lives towards, contributing to the federal government and trying to build a better society, that's been taken away. So Congressman Moskowitz has yet to apologize or address really the failures of Doge. He just said they didn't get the job done, it went nowhere, and it's basically dead. Where's the accountability for his part to play in that?
Right.
With Ron DeSantis, I think it's easy to say, oh, these were apolitical appointments, but why isn't he speaking out against Alligator Alcatraz? When he went
Right.
down there, he was really most animated by saying, don't call this a concentration camp. Stop those
Right.
comparisons. So he's really defending the DeSantis administration here in our district, in the 23rd district in the city of Fort Lauderdale. The pride flag that has been drawn in street art on Sebastian Street near the beach, near the site of the first gay-friendly resort in American history, the Marlin Beach Hotel, which opened in 1972. It's a historic landmark. And Ron DeSantis has attempted to erase this pride flag, street art, and these expressions of LGBTQ identity across our state of Florida. And we've seen cities like Orlando, Key West, Miami Beach complying with DeSantis's order, complying in advance against fascism. What the city of Fort Lauderdale is doing is standing up to the DeSantis administration, fighting the order in court. And we just saw in New York City the Trump administration back down, and they're going to restore the Stonewall Pride flag at Stonewall Park, that National Historic Monument that was established. And so I think that's a great precedent. But when we don't have our Democratic representative speaking out because he's afraid of offending his political patron, Ron DeSantis, at the same time, that you'll notice when he's talking about Donald Trump, he's talking about how Trump cannot fail. He can only be failed. It is Kristi Noem letting down Donald Trump. It's Mr. President, imagine the ratings if you were to fire Pam Bondi like
Right.
it was an episode of The Apprentice. He's really glazing Donald Trump in a way that I find very unsettling. But when we consider that that Moskowitz was considered to be Trump's FEMA pick, and now with redistricting hanging over everything's head, we might still see a Jared Moskowitz appointment in the Trump administration. And I think Jared Moskowitz is cognizant of that. And as much as he tries to play the partisan warrior on TV, it is very subtle, but he does not directly criticize Donald Trump. It's only Trump's allies and the people that are letting him down and not actually executing the MAGA vision that Trump ran on in 2024. And from a Democrat, I find that line of criticism rather duplicitous and pretty unsettling for what it implies about what Moskowitz actually wants to see the Trump administration do. Does he want to see them succeed? I don't believe that that is going to help the people in our community.
For sure. Well, I mean, hopefully at least he'll be unemployed come January. So there's that. So one of your core planks is like running to ban congressional stock trading. Moskowitz has like multiple late stock act filings that he made. He made large sets of trades on the same day as like tariff filings that he spoke out against. He blames third-party advisors. Is the problem with individual behavior in Congress, or is there like a systemic problem that needs to be addressed?
It's completely a systemic problem. And while Jared Moskowitz bought the dip on Donald Trump's trade war on so-called Liberation Day last year, April 7th, when he bought Lockheed Martin, he bought Caterpillar, which the Senate just approved a $295 million sale of Caterpillar bulldozers to Israel, to the
Right.
IDF, to be used to demolish Palestinian homes and destroy hospitals and refugee camps. Jared Moskowitz has done that, but it happened in his first term as well. He sold shares in Seacoast Bank the day before Silicon Valley Bank dropped, like a bucket, like a rock in a bucket. And Jared Moskowitz sold his bank shares before those shares tanked by about 30% the very next day. So there's an element of insider trading here. There's an element of corruption here, but this is a systematic problem. Jared Moskowitz is one of many that have
Yeah.
made a killing on trading stocks while sitting in Congress. I mentioned before, Jared Moskowitz bought Lockheed Martin stock while he's sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So right before important legislation is passed or the United States initiates some military action, Jared Moskowitz is buying that stock and seeing it jump up in his portfolio. With with Caterpillar, that stock went up 175% since he bought it in April of last year, as the United States is approving these sales to the IDF of Caterpillar's equipment. So there's a tremendous corruption issue at play here, and it's systematic. And unfortunately, Congress makes a pretty good salary, $174,000 a year. But for many that have to maintain two households and don't have a working spouse, it's actually quite hard. And that's why you see some members that opt to sleep on the couch in their house office or they share roommates, but many others just play the market and use that to supplement their income. So I think when we look at the compensation for members of Congress as well as staff who are famously underpaid, we need to be realistic about what it takes so that we can remove this element of corruption in our politics that so many are using to either get by or really to, in the case of Congressman Moskowitz, who doesn't need the help, he's got a 10 to $12 million net worth. They're just looking out for their personal self-interest, and that is completely despicable.
For sure. Cool. So we touched on climate a little bit earlier, but I wanted to ask, the Green New Deal framing is almost 7 years old at this point, hasn't moved a lot. Would you commit to voting against any budget, any reconciliation package that includes new fossil fuel leases, new LNG exports, even like under party whip pressure? Because I know there's been a lot of like pressure within the party, even on progressives, to allow these types of like internal extraction stuff to continue happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's time for Democratic socialists in Congress to start taking some lonely votes and to buck party leadership. I will say that if I am elected, when I'm elected, I don't expect to have many friends in Democratic Party leadership. I've come out against Hakeem Jeffries as House Speaker. If Democrats are to retake the House majority in November, I told Axios back in October that I'm out on Hakeem Jeffries when he failed to support the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, after everything that we've heard about vote blue no matter who. That to me showed that Hakeem Jeffries is not the leader that we need to meet this moment and to embrace the next generation of progressive leaders, of democratic socialist leaders that are running for elected office across the country. And I do believe that we need to end all fossil fuel subsidies. We need to end all fossil fuel extraction. And when I talk about transitioning the energy economy into democratic control, when we have investor-owned utilities like Florida Power and Light that are raising rates on Floridians to the tune of $7 billion, when we have the construction of these AI data centers that are jacking up the cost of electricity, using water and other finite resources to really just pointless ends to enrich a very few small number of investors at the top, like Sam Altman of OpenAI. This is not the economy that is going to address the climate crisis that we're already experiencing. And that 350 parts per million, we're already past that. The level of warming that we're experiencing today is only going to increase. Even if we stop all fossil fuel extraction, all fossil fuel production, the relative effect of what we've already burned is going to continue to warm the planet for years and years to come. So we need to bring this energy economy into democratic control. Donald Trump is literally paying $1 billion not to construct wind turbines off the coast of New England. This is insanity. We need to work with other large global economies and powers like China to really develop the clean energy infrastructure and to supply this not only across the United States, but to the global South, which through no fault of their own is going to face and bear the brunt of the worst effects of climate change, even when they did the least to contribute to the climate crisis that we're experiencing. So I believe that that is absolutely something that we need to take a hard line on in Congress and hold up legislation, hold up pieces of must-pass legislation like budget reconciliation to restore the incentives for clean energy that were passed into the Inflation Reduction Act. But that's truly only the start. We need to go so much further than that.
Amazing. So to go a little bit more local, like Bahia Mar, Monarch Hill, most federal candidates like don't have specific local fights they can point out that they've been a part of, which is I think a super benefit for you is that you've been doing this for a long time and you're doing stuff on the ground. Actually pick one, walk me through one of those two and like what you learned about how power actually works in Broward County, and how it change how you function in DC.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about the Bahia Mar fight in the city of Fort Lauderdale because Fort Lauderdale has the most miles of navigable waterways in the entire United States. We have the intercoastal, so the global super elite have their yachts based here. The 100, 200-foot super yachts that have the helicopters that land on them. South Florida's marine industry supports more than 100,000 jobs, well over 100,000 jobs. And the city of Fort Lauderdale has a prime piece of real estate that they leased to a luxury private developer to build condominiums. Bahia Mar, which is the public land that the International Boat Show leases, provides billions of dollars in economic output in the local community. But what the city did is when a luxury developer came to City Hall with a deal to make a 99-year lease that would continue to persist past anyone's lifetime that was working on it, a luxury developer got a prime piece of public real estate to construct multi-million dollar luxury condominiums and towers on a piece of publicly owned land. The Sun Sentinel called it the most controversial deal in the city's history. I was quoted in the Sun Sentinel because I had remarks prepared, and then as the meeting was happening in the city commission, the lobbyist for the boat show, the client that was lobbying, the lobbyist for the boat show and the lobbyist for the luxury developer, came to the dais and said, we have a new deal worked out. It's been written. We haven't been able to submit it to the commission for review because we literally just figured it out. But trust us, pass this, and it passed on a very close vote. And so the city of Fort Lauderdale gave one of its most prime revenue-driving pieces of real estate away to a luxury condominium developer on a sweetheart deal that does not extract nearly the level of profitability from the rental agreement that we should expect to get from luxury condo towers that are going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars all told when they're all end up sold. And that fight has extended. That was several years ago, but even in the last year, that same luxury developer is now engaged in a fight to develop the beach basketball courts in Fort Lauderdale that were constructed after the Fort Lauderdale beach wade-ins in the 1960s, the civil rights wade-ins to desegregate Fort Lauderdale Beach on July 4th, 1961. NAACP activists, college students, they waded in and dared the city to arrest them, and the city sued, but they lost the lawsuit, and so that desegregated Fort Lauderdale Beach, and these basketball courts were built as a marker and a community hub, a cultural hub where everyone can come and play and be a part of something together. This luxury developer tried to tear those up to build pickleball courts for the luxury condo guests and
Yeah.
owners. And so this is something that I think is so fundamental because it's the closest to home when it comes to local government, but it's so emblematic of, I was so surprised coming back home from Washington, D.C., where it's usually Congress that's passing legislation in the dead of night. But I had to wait until 11 o'clock or midnight just to make a 2-minute public comment at my city commission hearing. And it's because from Congress on down, we have a corrupt campaign finance system where even at the local municipal level, there are lobbyists that can literally write city charters and change the city constitutions. And we just have this corporate capture at every level of our government. And that's something that became even more apparent to me after working on the Bernie Sanders campaign when I came home and saw the problems locally. And that really only redoubled my desire to affect this kind of political change. And now I'm trying to do that as a candidate.
Amazing. Yeah, we have a lot of that going around. Our premier recently basically gave a 99-year lease at incredibly favorable terms on the entirety of the Toronto waterfront to build a Scandinavian spa from an American private company that is has incredible terms where they can pull out whenever they want to, paying no penalties, but we can't revoke the contract in any way, shape, or form, or we have to pay like $25 million in fees back to the company that has a lease on this land that we're generating no public money out of now, when it was actually set up as a public park that had been in place for like 60 years. So a lot of the same things going around. And unfortunately, our system, I don't know how much you know again about like Canadian politics, but we have a first past the post system with like 5 parties. So our conservative premier is currently running a majority government with full control, carte blanche, what he wants, with 38% of the vote.
Yeah, that's atrocious. Yeah, and we're trying to change that system here in the United States as well. reforming our electoral system so that we can have more proportional representation. I think that's a direction that we need to move in beyond just abolishing the Electoral College or the United States Senate if we're going to have truly reflective representation that reflects the desires of the voting public.
Yeah, especially like with post-COVID, like changes in demography in the United States. Like I think with 2030, you're looking at like Florida gaining a seat, California losing seats, Texas gaining seats, like states all over the center of the country essentially gaining seats while you're losing them from the coast. So the electoral college becomes an even more kind of existential threat to progressivism, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the preconceived notion that Democrats ran on in 2024, where they only effectively campaigned in 7 states and lost all 7 of them,
Yeah.
that strategy is out the window now because I believe it could not only be just 1 or 2 seats that Florida picks up, it could be 3 or 4 with
Yeah.
the rate of growth relative to other parts of the country. Texas as well could gain many more seats, and so this could completely throw the Democratic Party's strategy on the electoral map for the Electoral College, make it completely bunk. And for far too long, the Democratic Party has written off entire swaths of the country because, frankly, they don't have a message that resonates with the working class,
Right.
which is the one majority across the country. But the Democratic Party doesn't speak to that. So they're going to need to change their strategy. And that's why I strongly believe that we need more challengers like myself that are running as democratic socialists that are going to speak to working class issues and not to the partisan divide, which people identify with less and less, with more people identifying as non-party affiliated or independent voters than with either party these days, because they just see neither one truly serving the interests of working class people.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Democratic Party pretty much like abandoned the working class with like the advent of like Henry Wallace being torched at the DNC. So progressives' record has been kind of mixed in Congress, with like some being primaried out because of APAC money, like Jamal Bowman getting hit with like $20 million of funding for a primary race, and some accused of like softening stances that they had advocated for before taking office. So, what do you do differently? How do you hold to the things that you're putting forward when you get elected in January?
Yeah, it is, I believe, putting together a democratic socialist voting bloc within Congress, acting as our own caucus that moves as one, especially when it comes to when we were talking a few moments ago about reconciliation and climate change legislation, that we are exerting our power when there's currently, I believe, a 4 vote margin in the House of Representatives. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, myself, AOC, and others, we can certainly sway votes and really, when it comes to the Democratic Party counting its votes, we can extract real concessions to pass key pieces of legislation. I know that APAC is going to spend an ungodly amount of money if they truly see me as a threat, and we're building that credibility and that viability every single day. So that's why we're trying to knock on 80,000 doors. That's why, to the degree that anyone watching is able to contribute financially, we can certainly use those contributions. Donate whatever you can. It all goes towards our organizing efforts. The canvassing I was describing yesterday, that's the face-to-face conversations we're having that we're going to need to break through. And we know that when APAC comes in with their money, it's not going to be talking about Israel because Israel
Of
is
course not.
incredibly unpopular. It's going to be trying to pull the wool over people's eyes and talking about other issues and trying to burnish the image of these corporate Democrats that they're supporting, including Jared Moskowitz. But I think as long as we prepare people for that eventuality, that they know that this money is coming, the flood of false advertisements and attacks is on its way, then we can prepare ourselves for it. But that's why these streams, frankly, are so important, because not taking not taking the corporate PAC money, these grassroots donations are so important. We do need the
Sure.
resources to get the word out, and it's going towards organizing. It's going towards involving young people in the political process and spreading our message. And we know that based on our polling, which I mentioned, the U.S. support for military funding for Israel. But what we found is that when people learn about our campaign, we take a clear and commanding lead. Jared Moskowitz
Absolutely.
is below 50% in an initial head-to-head. Once they learn about us, I take a 13% lead, and it grows even more. Even after people hear that I'm a democratic socialist, that I'm against Hakeem Jeffries for House Speaker, that I've described the Israel-Gaza war as a genocide, that actually grows our support. And so it's truly just a matter of getting the resources to take on AIPAC, because we know Jared Moskowitz, he's not having public town halls here. His constituent service is non-existent. So people don't see him locally. They see us. We're out in the community every single day. And if we have the resources to match, then there's no question that we're going to win this race.
For sure. Yeah, I was actually looking at that, I think it was the Center for Strategic Politics, kind of head to head, where given people that have no information, Moskowitz is ahead because he's the incumbent. But as soon as they read a short bio of either of you, you immediately take a massive lead. So I think it's super, super important and awesome that you're doing all of these streams and getting in touch with so many people and talking to so many communities, because the more people I think hear this kind of message, it resonates with people, because for so long, people have felt like there is nobody they can vote for. People have been disenfranchised because there's nobody advocating for you, right? Like for the average person. So seeing campaigns like this is incredible, super refreshing. So I wanted to thank you, A, for running in the way that you're running and representing people the way that you're representing them. So it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you're describing my experience. I've waited so long to see a progressive, a democratic socialist running in places like South Florida, in these areas that are previously considered to be no-goes for progressive candidates because they're too electorally close with the Republican Party. We just saw Ana Lilia Mejia, former political director for Bernie Sanders, running, and that was a very close competitive district. She actually ran ahead of Kamala Harris and Mikey Sherrill, the New Jersey Democratic governor. So progressive messaging and embracing the DSA label is popular when Bernie Sanders and AOC, two Democratic socialists, are the two most popular politicians in the United States of America. So we know that this is a message that resonates, and people, especially in districts like ours, we care about Medicare for all. We care about a living wage. We care about ending U.S. support for war and genocide and investing in America. And that's a winning message. Fascism is a whole lot scarier than someone who's not taking corporate PAC money and is looking out for our community and the working class.
Yeah, completely agreed. All right, so I have like one last question, and I think Chad has hit like a little over $400, so I will put the moose hat on before we end, just so you can see what my chat subjects me to as well. But my last question is like last one. It's August, polls are closing for the primary. Somebody in Deerfield is like just getting off work. They're tired. They're walking to their car. They haven't voted yet. You have like 30 seconds. Like, what is your pitch to that person?
You can have a life where you're not this stressed, where you're not this pressed for time, where you're not worried about spending every waking moment of your day earning the money you need just to survive and get by. We can have a world where you don't have to worry about going to see the doctor or getting a prescription filled, or whether you can afford to put gas in the tank or afford your groceries. We can have a working class democracy, but it's going to take every single one of us. And I'm going to be right here with you the day after the election to ask you how it's going and how can I help. I'm truly accountable to the people, and I look forward to seeing you for the next 2 years when I'm representing you here and directly about the issues you care about so that I can fight for you in Washington.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. And we just hit the $500 goal. So
let's go. Let's go, Chad. Thank you so much.
All right, let me grab the hat 1 second. You can
Moose
see
hat. Let's
literally
go.
They usually do this to me. They'll start hype trains in the middle of like super serious stories to get the levity of making me do them.